Hi everyone, I'm Melinda Rosel. Today I'm breaking down the initiatives and referendum process in Arizona because these two tools are really at the heart of the direct democracy. I'm going to define both, explain how each one is created, compare and contrast them, and then talk through pros and cons and how they connect back to Arizona's constitution. First, an initiative is when voters take the lead and propose a new law or change an existing law, and then gather signatures to put on the ballot so the public can vote on it. A referendum is different. A referendum is when voters push back on a law the legislature already passed. By gathering signatures to put that law on the ballot, it's basically a voter pause and review on a bill because the public gets the final say on whether it should go into effect. Also, in both cases, once something is on the ballot, voters usually see a yes or no choice for an initiative. A yes vote supports creating the new law or amendment. For a referendum, a yes vote supports allowing the law to go into effect, and a no vote is the citizen veto. How initiatives are created in Arizona. Now let's talk about how an initiative is created. Step one is the idea and the language. The group sponsoring the initiative has to have the full text ready. Then, before collecting a single signature, they submit an application for serial number. With the complete title and text to the Arizona Secretary of State. Once the application is approved, the state issues a serial number and signature gathering can begin. Step 2 is signature gathering. Arizona sets different signature thresholds depending on what you are trying to do. A statutory initiative, meaning changing state law, requires signatures equal to 10% of the votes cast for governor in the last election. A constitutional initiative requires 15%. Step 3 is the deadline. Initiative petitions must be filled with the Secretary of State at least 4 months before the election where the measure will be voted on. Step 4 is review and verification. After filing, the Secretary of State County Recorders processes signatures to confirm there are enough valid signatures for the measure to qualify. If it qualifies, it goes on the general election ballot. Voters decide and it passes. It becomes law when approved by the required vote and proclaimed. How referendums are created in Arizona. Now the referendum process. A referendum starts with an actual bill that the legislature passed. Citizens are trying to refer that bill or part of it to the ballot. Importantly, the Arizona Constitution also says that to give people time to file referendum petitions, most laws do not take effect for 90 days after the legislative session ends, unless it's an emergency measure. Just like an initiative, before collecting signatures, sponsors file an application for serial number so the referendum petition is properly set up. The signature threshold for a referendum is 5% of votes cast for governor in the last election, which is lower than initiatives. The deadline is also tighter. Referendum petitions must be filed more than 90 days after final adjournment of the legislative session that passed the measure. Here's the clean comparison. Initiative equals voters propose. Referendum equals voters review or veto. Initiatives usually take longer because you're drafting a whole proposal and planning for the next election. Referendums are time sensitive because they are tied to what the legislature just passed and the clock matters. Pros and cons. For initiatives, the biggest pro is that they give people a direct path when they feel the legislature is not addressing an issue. It can be empowering, especially for topics that might not move through the normal legislative process. The downside is that ballot measures can be complex, and yes or no vote can oversimplify detailed policy. Another con is that once voters pass an initiative, Arizona's constitution limits the governor's veto power and also limits how the legislature can repeal or amend many voter approved measures that can protect the will of the voters, but they can also make it harder to fix problems later. For referendums, the pro is accountability. If lawmakers pass something that feels out of step with the public, voters can require that it be reviewed at the ballot box. The con is delay and uncertainty. Referendums can postpone a law from taking effect, and it can turn urgent issues into long political battles. Also, signature gathering has real costs, so not every community has equal ability to launch a referendum campaign. How this supports direct democracy in Arizona. Arizona's constitution is very direct about this. It says the people reserve the power to propose laws and amendments and to enact or reject them at the polls, independently of the legislature, and also reserve the power to approve or reject legislative acts. That is direct democracy in writing and not just in theory. So my takeaway is simple. In Arizona, initiatives let voters build, and referendums let voters hit pause and decide. Both are how direct democracy shows up in real life here.